Hey there, fourth grade mathematicians. Today we're going to be looking at 1-4, which is a skill that is a review from earlier when we looked at 2-2 and we were rounding to get a good estimate of our sums or our answers to our addition problems. Today we're going to bump it up by using rounding to understand place value concepts to round those whole numbers to the millions place. Before we move into the review of rounding, what I want you to remember is math. Mistakes allow thinking to happen. So while we're in quantitative reasoning, it's okay to make mistakes because that shows me you're thinking and that's that growth mindset. So let's look at our rounding mountain again. So a quick review of the rounding mountain is, remember that when you are rounding a number, the number that you are rounding, you're considering if we're going to give it a shove to the next digit or if we're going to keep it low to that number. So 5 and above, give it a shove. 4, keep it low. 4 down low, keep it low. So let's look at here our first one. This is in your math book on the independent practice that we'll be doing. This one right here, this number is 128,955. So remember that the underlined here in the directions is telling you that this is the number that's going to get rounded. So we're going to be rounding 8, and the numbers after it are all going to be zeros because we're rounding it to a nice whole number. Let me change that there a little bit, make those zeros look a little bit cleaner. So we're looking at this 8 here, and our number is 128, where we're rounding the 8. So we have to go look at the buddy next door to the 8. So the buddy next door to the 8 is a 9. So is this 128 going to be shoved up to 129,000? Or are we going to keep it low to 128,000? So looking at that 8, my buddy next door is the 9. That 9 is here. That tells me to shove it up to the 129,000. So if we are rounding 128,955 to the nearest thousands place, it would be 129,000. And if you think of a number line, that 128,955, that 955 is getting close to 1,000, so that makes sense. Let's try it next with another one, 9,924. So I'd like you to follow along with your whiteboard right now, and let's consider how we would round this. So you could even, if you wanted to, draw yourself a little rounding mountain, just to remember that that benchmark number is 5 and 4. So 4, you're keeping it low. 5, you're giving it a shove. You could draw that as a little visual cue to help you remember. So which number are we rounding in 9,924? We are rounding the number in the thousands place again this time. It's a 9. So that 9 is what we're going to be looking at. So my number 9 here in the 9,924, is that going to be shoved up to a 10? Or are we going to keep that low to a 9? So let's look at my buddy next door. I'm going to do that in a different color so you can see. He's a 9. My 9 follows this part on the rounding mountain right here. So that's 5 and above, give it a shove to 10. So how do we change this to a 10? And remember, these numbers will now all be zeros afterwards. Well, think of our base 10 system, right? Our next place value, once you hit a 9, would go over here, and we would know that that would be one of those. So 10 thousands is 1/10,000, correct? So that would move up, that would become a 10 or 10,000. and you have your zeros afterwards. So these all became zeros, like down here, and that 10 was the next place value over, because we knew that the 9 next door to my 9 and my 9,000 right here tells me to give it a shove to 10. Let's look at the last one here, 160,000. I'd like you to pause the video and see if you could round 160,656 to the nearest thousands place. So just to give you a hint, you're going to look at that 6 to tell you, is that being shoved up to 200,000? Or you're keeping that low to 100,000? Look at the range of those numbers. 100,000. It's a big range. So what did you think? I would agree with you if you said it was 200,000 is what we would be rounding that to, because that 6 falls here. These are all examples of us shoving it to the next rounded up. So that 6 here, that 1, is going to be, that 6 is telling me to change that 1 to a 2, and then make everything a 0 afterwards to make it 200,000. Needed one more 0. Didn't look very good. So that becomes a 2. Everything else becomes a 0. So you can see it underneath to 200,000. So the big thing to remember today when you're rounding is to first figure out which place value you are rounding to. You will be rounding anywhere from the hundreds place value, maybe even tens, all the way up to the 100,000s, even 1 million. And the next thing to remember is if you come across a problem like 5 and 7, and you are rounding this one and you're rounding up the next one, you may have to add that next place value. So like in 9,924, we knew we had to add that next place value, so that became 10,000. And the last thing that I think you should consider is think of an imaginary number line, and when you're rounding on that imaginary number line, and I'm going to simplify this, thinking of like rounding the number 16. If you had number 0 here, and this was 20, 16 would fall low, this would have been 10, right, halfway. 16 would probably be somewhere around here, right? 16 would not round down to 10 because it's closer to 20, so it would round up to 20 if we were rounding to the nearest tens. So that imaginary number line strategy was always helpful for me, and I think it will be helpful for you. Good luck, 4th grade quantitative reasoners. I can't wait to see what you do.